So these trillions of microorganisms down in our large intestine could potentially hold the secrets to, or cures, or better management of so many different chronic conditions, diseases, syndromes, and even infertility. So
Yeah.
it's really, really cool stuff when you think about it.
So we know, Nick, that there's this relationship with the brain, and we know there's this relationship with hormones, and maybe this relationship with the immune system.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what else is really amazing about this microbiome and how it kind of works symbiotically with us.
Well, I've been delving into the immune system lately. I'm doing a presentation for Edith Cowan University to staff. It's a webinar on Zoom, and similar to this. And it, like, I was just thinking, like, getting into the research and seeing how the brain communicates with the microbiome and vice versa, or the gut communicates with the brain. We were only theorizing at the moment, but the three main pathways are either through the blood or through the nervous systems, so the central and the enteric nervous systems. But the last one's really, really fascinating, particularly at the moment, seen as what we're enduring, having to self-isolate and or try to sing happy birthday a couple of times when we're washing our hands, and all these different types of things because of COVID-19. And people are really, really interested in immunity, hence the presentation tomorrow. And what I learned was, like, I always knew that there was a connection between the gut microbiome and immunity. I think it's pretty well established that our gut microbiome actually trains our immune system. So it's like our immune system goes into boot camp or something like that for the first 3 years of our life. And it actually teaches the microbiome actually teaches our immune system to be able to recognize friends and foes. So to be able to recognize harmful pathogens, bacteria, viruses, fungi, all these different types of organisms, be able to recognize which ones are friendly and which ones are more and beneficial, and which ones are actually harmful. So we're laying down the foundations for a great immune system. Now, what is not as commonly known or even researched is the impact that the microbiome may have on immunity specifically, and the way that it functions on a day-to-day basis. So we're really in our infancy in terms of understanding, but it might not be a direct connection between, between how resistant we are to a really dangerous virus like COVID. It might be it touches the brain, and then the brain does something to the heart, and then the heart releases, all these different, it's maybe just setting off a bit of a chain reaction.
Right.
However, like, when getting back to more fertility though, when you think about it, like, one of the best pieces of advice I could give to someone who's looking to have a baby is to look after the lifestyle factors. And so diet and exercise are really, really key, obviously, getting enough sleep, reducing stress, and all these types of things. Guess what? The microbiome has an influence on our waistlines. Like, researchers have taken gut bacteria from an obese human and put it in a rat, and a germ-free rat, so no bacteria in the rat yet. So they received this transplant from the obese human, and then the subject rats, obviously they eat the same amount and they do the same amount of exercise as the control rats. And guess what happens to the subject rats, the ones that have just received that gut flora from an obese human? Guess what happens?
They get overweight.
They certainly do. And I was actually reading up about PCOS the other day, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and researchers have actually done something similar, where they have taken a microbiome from a human that is not supposed to be a healthy one, so from an unhealthy human, and they've actually put that microflora into into a rat, and the rats have developed all different types of diseases, but one of the things that the rats developed was PCOS as well.
That's really interesting, and it's fascinating too, isn't it, Nick? How I mean, we know that different microbiome patterns appear, say, throughout a woman's menstrual cycle. So she can have obviously a microbiome in her gut, and a microbiome in the vagina, and a microbiome in the cervix, and a microbiome in the uterus. But that in itself can also vary throughout the menstrual cycle. So this is something that is dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And affecting change all of the time. So, Nick, a lot of people say to me when they come and see me for fertility, but also for PCOS, for endometriosis, all of those sorts of things, what can I do to help my situation? So let's just talk particularly to the gut microbiome. Like, what are the sorts of things people can do either with their diet and or their lifestyle choices in order to get the best possible microbiome they can?
Okay. So I would probably start with fiber. It's becoming more mainstream now. It's great, isn't it? Fiber's the best. And you know what? A lot of the time, like if I have a patient coming to see me who's like presenting complaint is they want to lose weight and keep it off. And they've been dieting for a while. They've tried various different avenues, and it just hasn't worked. And all of a sudden, sometimes I just flip the focus, and I say, well, why don't we just work on fixing your gut? There's an established connection with between gut health and weight management or losing weight. Why don't we just more focus on that? And then all of a sudden, we're really eating the same types of foods anyway, but we take our minds off and stresses and anxieties away from our waistline, and more focus on just trying to look after our gut and therefore our body. And it does amazing things. So mindset's so huge in all of this, and it certainly helps with mood, and with essentially your mindset. And we know that there's a connection between the brain and the gut. So when we think about it, if we're keeping a nice stable mood, that's going to be beneficial for our gut. We're probably going to be more likely to choose fiber because we're nice and rational, making the right decisions, all this stuff. So
Chocolate.
yeah, a little bit's fine. And what happens is, like, we get into this cycle. So it's not just the case of, saying, okay, I'm just going to go and eat more fiber. It's the after effects of eating the fiber that are fantastic in terms of mood regulation, and therefore more fiber intake later on. I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just get down and dirty. If anyone here was about to write their shopping list, Nick, what, and just maybe talk to the sort of prebiotic, probiotic thing too, because a lot of people don't know the difference. Okay. What are they going to get on their shopping list?
Can I share a slide?
Oh, go for it.
Let's try. Anyway. All right. So I've just got this awesome slide, which I seem to be using a lot. And most people find it quite interesting because people hear about, can you see fiber types?
Yes, we can. It looks great.
Excellent.
I love this. Take a screenshot.
I might just try and put it in presentation mode if that works.
Otherwise, we'll see the rest of your presentation there. And then you've got nothing left.
Totally. Okay, so is that?
Yes, we can see that.
Excellent. So there's not just, fiber isn't just like we talk about it as if it's just like this one thing, but fiber is completely different depending on the type that you're consuming. So what we used to think is you could have 30 grams of Metamucil and tick your fiber box for the day, and that'd be it. That's a hell of a lot of Metamucil, by the way. So I wouldn't advise going and doing that. But I suppose what we've got to look at is the different types of fiber and the roles that they play. Some are prebiotic. So definition of a prebiotic fiber is one where your microbiome actually feed on that particular fiber. They actually ferment that fiber or digest it. And some aren't, and they're just insoluble fiber, for instance, is very much like that, where it actually doesn't have much of a role other than bulking up the stool. Really small percentage of it is of this type of fiber is fermentable, but I suppose the real importance of insoluble fiber. So you're probably thinking, all right, Nick, you're saying that insoluble fiber isn't really prebiotic, so it's not really beneficial to our gut microbiome, right? But what it actually does is it helps to spread soluble fiber and resistant starch throughout the length of the colon. Now, why is that important? It's so key. It's because if you're actually spreading the fuel source the length of the whole large intestine, that means that all the microbes that love to eat plants, the plant munchers, or your healthy bacteria, everyone's going to get fed. And therefore, they will take up more space and proliferate or increase in numbers and dominate the area, so that if a harmful pathogen, bacteria, virus, or something like that came along, there wouldn't be as many resources for that said microbe to actually dominate within that region. So there's a bit of a theory going around, and there's no cure to coronavirus, or there's no way of preventing it other than all the things that you've heard of before, all those safety tips, washing your hands being an example. However, if your microbes are really like well balanced down in your large intestine, there's a theory going around that maybe, you know, a virus like corona would have to actually come and really dominate that space, and it would probably find it harder the healthier your gut microbiome is.
Wow.
So I'm going around in circles a bit here, but on this slide pretty much gives you your shopping list. What you do need is a combination of soluble resistant starch and insoluble fiber. The soluble and the resistant starches, they're the guys that are known as prebiotic fibers. They're the ones that your microbes absolutely love. It nourishes them. And then through the fermentation process or the digestion process, your microbes will actually release a whole bunch of really lovely byproducts, which not only look after your gut health, but these are the things. So things like short chain fatty acids, vitamins and minerals, antioxidants, things like that. I mean, think about fertility. Folate is something that is produced through the fermentation of fibers like soluble and resistant starch. B12 is another really key nutrient that, like I said, when I was in baby dietitian school, I had no idea that we were actually grabbing folate, B vitamins and folate, B12 from the large intestine, particularly as a byproduct of fiber digestion. So yeah, it's really cool stuff.
I love this slide. I reckon you should, well, you already have marked it, but I think this is definitely something that should be shared with everybody. And I love the fact that you're looking at the balance between all of them. You kind of have to have all of them for the others to be of value. So Nick, I'm going to move on just because I don't want you to share all your secrets. People can always come and see you if they've got specific problems. But I want to talk specifically to the world of fertility and the role of the microbiome. I alluded before that we now know that there are different microbiomes in the vagina, the cervix, the uterus. We think that it varies throughout the month, but we also think that there are different microbiomes in association with conditions such as recurrent miscarriage, perhaps even endometriosis. And so we know that this is an emerging area. We know that we can now measure the microbiome through assays, DNA assays, to look at the different microbiome in the uterus and the vagina and so on, and potentially treat them. A lot of the research around the microbiome in the reproductive tract has talked about lactobacilli and also the subtypes of lactobacilli. I think Innes is the one that we think is the best for reducing the risks of miscarriage and so on. And this is certainly all at the theoretical stage at this point. What are your thoughts around that? What's your thought around lactobacilli? I mean, obviously you can walk into any health food store, pharmacy, and pick up your combination off the shelf or the fridge of lactobacilli. What are your thoughts around that?
I think it just blows my mind, to be honest. Like to think that like there's a beneficial effect of a microbiome in the vagina is just phenomenal. Like and does the microbiome from the large intestine have an influence on all these different systems? And my guess is, and it's only a guess, by the way, because I don't, to my knowledge anyway, the science hasn't been able to find a mechanism where, you know, the effects of what's happening in the gut transfer into the vagina. But I wouldn't put it past it, because like some of the other things that we have actually found and the mechanisms of how they actually work, you would just never think that would happen in a million years.
And so, maybe you and I discussed earlier today, maybe it's not the direct effect of colonizing with that microbiota, but more how the good gut health then impacts on the functioning of those other systems, the inflammation, the hormonal control, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, totally. And after that conversation, I did come across an article. I'm not sure if you received it.
Definitely on my to-do list tonight.
It was really interesting because like we're starting to establish a theory that the way that our bugs, our microbes in our gut, the way that they actually impact on our immune system is really, really fascinating. And, you know, you would have heard of white blood cells before. Like we've got this little army of white blood cells that really protect our bodies from invading armies and also things that happen within us, like for instance, cancer. And so our microbiome can actually, it seems like it's almost pulling the immunity strings a little bit. So if the immune system is behind all of this, and so say you've got an unhealthy gut, your immune system might not be, if it's not in harmony and balance, in fact, it's probably not going to be in harmony and balance if you've got an unhealthy gut. And so if your immune system is also out of whack, then that could potentially affect the microbiome of the reproductive tract. Mm-hmm. So that's where I think the connection might be, but I'm no Einstein, so we'll wait for the research to come along.
This theory to test. So look, Nick, I'm going to wrap it up. So just in summary, microbiome, huge pioneering area right now, particularly in the realms of its relationship with other body systems, how we can actually improve it, what is the best way to improve it. Oh, just quickly answering that question, is there a standard lactobacilli, or do you think it's specific? What do you think?
I think not yet. And when you think about menstrual cycles and how dynamic they are, like seriously, our knowledge about probiotics is, once again, it's really in its infancy. And you know, a probiotic might work for one person for a given condition or gap that it's filling, and then it won't work for somebody else. And perhaps it might be the same within the same person at a different time of the month. So I think our understanding has certainly grown in the last couple of years of the whole microbiome and what it does, but we've got a long way to go, I think, that one. However, like just to quickly get this in, like probiotics aren't supposed, they're not harmful in the amounts that are prescribed on a normal run-of-the-mill probiotic that you find in a pharmacy. So I guess what I'm saying there is they're pretty harmless to
Yeah.
take.
They may do some good.
Yes,
They're
may.
unlikely to do any harm.
Exactly.
But it sounds to me, Nick, like you're more interested in actually feeding the microbiome, the good microbiome that is there, by looking at whole foods.
Definitely. Definitely. Why didn't I mention that? Uh, yeah, it's so the science really supports that. Whereas with probiotics, it's still a bit hitty missy. And it could be like taking a Berocca when you've got all your B vitamins from food already. You just wee it out. So it could be a situation like that. But like you say, it could also be really beneficial.
Yeah, good. All right. Well, watch this space, I guess. Watch what happens over the next months to years. Watch, as you have pointed out, the focus particularly with relation to the immune system and also the world of reproductive health. Nick Nation, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Really appreciate it. If you are interested in seeing Nick, you can catch him at www.nutritionnation.com.au. I'll vouch for the fact he's a fantastic dietitian, does some amazing work in the world of reproductive health. And thanks so much for your time tonight, Nick.
Thanks for having me, Tam.